This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Hello, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Chasing Excellence. I am Patrick. I am here all by my lonesome. I'm going to do another solo episode about the challenge we're just wrapping up here. I did this a few months ago with our first challenge, or the first challenge we sort of put out on the podcast. We did a 21-day trigger challenge, and we just are wrapping up a 21-day high performance challenge. We kicked off. I think the episode came out June 11th, where I gave a little bit more context as to what the challenge was focused on and gave some more rationale for why I wanted you to join. I certainly hope you did. I hope you joined us either in the Chase Tracker app, in the Chase Club, or you just did the DIY or simplified version that I gave at the end of that episode. But I really have been enjoying these challenges more so than I even expected. I've gotten more out of them than I expected, which is funny because I sit down, I put the 21 days together in terms of what we're going to do on day 1 and 3 and 7 and 12. But then the experience of actually waking up and saying, okay, well, what is today's, and then doing it, man, I really do hope that you either do one of the ones we've already put out or you jump into the next one when we launch a new one, which will be in about a month. I'll close out this episode with just a little hint towards what that's going to be. 21 days for me is just like the chef's kiss amount of time for something like this. It's enough time to really change behavior and to really change perspective, but it's not so much time that you feel like you've signed up for a real college course on something. And I think part of the reason why, and I started thinking about this in the midst of this high performance challenges, is that these challenges can kind of help us see things that we would otherwise let slip past our conscious attention. You know, we've talked about it before, this idea of the reticular activating system. I think I'm getting that term right, but it really just means that what you look for, you see more of. So if you are thinking about buying a truck, all of a sudden you start seeing more trucks on the road. And so what has happened in both the trigger challenge and the high performance challenge is, as I'm in the midst of it, as I'm doing the daily tasks, as I'm thinking about it, I start noticing other perspective, other ways of thinking about the thing, other people engaged in the thing, people talking about it. So in the first case, I started seeing triggers everywhere with people I know, with my own kids, with my own self, with myself, of course. But I also noticed people talking about triggers and responses to triggers, when I'm just, on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. And so I started thinking about it as like, this is kind of like an algorithm in real life, right? When we dive into these challenges, these 21-day challenges, what they kind of end up doing is they give our attention more of what we've already shown interest in, right? So that's what the algorithms are doing on, TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or any of these other platforms, is they're noticing, oh, you engaged in a post about X. I'm going to show you more posts about X. You engaged with a post from Y. I'm going to give you more posts from Y. And so when we dive into these challenges, when we give ourselves 21 days to say, I'm going to spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes thinking about this particular idea, this particular subject, what ends up happening is it expands, our mind expands, our attention expands, and we start seeing these ideas everywhere. At least that has been my case for, again, the trigger challenge and certainly this high performance challenge. So again, join us. I would really love for you to do so because I think they're wildly valuable. Okay, here's what I'd like to do today, just as we close this out. I've been collecting just some lessons as I've gone through this high performer challenge. And I want to start with an interesting one, which is, so through these high performance challenges in the Chase Club, which is our premium membership, I do a Friday Chase Club Chat Club, which is when I try to give the group a little bit of added content or context or another way to think about it or another perspective to create some conversation, to just add some depth to the work that we're doing as it relates to the challenge. And something interesting happened with this high performance challenge, which is I didn't get a lot of engagement from the group on the things I was sharing, which surprised me because the trigger challenge definitely got some conversation going and some engagement. And I think people were open to jumping into that. And I've been thinking about maybe why or what the difference is between the trigger challenge and the high performance challenge. And I think, I can't say this for sure, but I think it might be because considering jumping into a high performance challenge makes the assumption that you consider yourself to be a high performer. In other words, that part of your identity is wrapped up in the idea that you are a high performer. And that might be a stretch for a lot of people. And I think that that was a barrier for more people jumping into this particular challenge than I expected. And so I started thinking about that a lot, and I certainly don't have any answers. But what I wanted to do is just give you 4 lessons that I came out with as it relates to the identity of high performers. Who are high performers? And hopefully by the end of this, you can see that high performers aren't a certain status of person, that either you are a high performer or you are not, but in fact, it is a series of actions. It is a mindset. It is a belief system. And it is, of course, also an identity, but it's an identity that you can adopt, that we can adopt, again, with the right mindset, with the right actions. And so if when we put this high performer challenge out, you thought, or some part of you thought, well, I'm not a high performer. I'm not a CEO. I'm not a high level athlete. My identity is not about performing well. Hopefully, I can convince you that that is incorrect. And I will tell you that I think part of the lessons for me in this challenge was recognizing where I also wasn't allowing myself the identity of being a high performer, and how that, in fact, that identity, that belief or that limiting belief, I believe has been holding me back. And so again, I've got 4 kind of high level lessons that I'm pulling out of this challenge about what high performers are, or who high performers are. And so I just want to run through them, and hopefully they resonate with you. I would love to know what you think about these, by the way. You can always email me at patrick@chasingexcellence.email about this, about anything. Or you can send me a DM on Substack as well. I would love to hear from you. I would love to know if you dove into this challenge or not. So first big thing that I'm pulling away from this high performer challenge is that high performers are not satisfied with how things are because they know that things could be better. This is something that I found. There was a guy, I don't remember his actual name, Dr. K, I think is his name. I'm forgetting his full name, but he goes by Healthy Gamer, I think, on the interwebs. I think that's his handle. Anyways, he put out a video where he talked about the lessons he's learned, or the common traits he's seen between high performers and low performers. And kind of his number one thing was high performers are just not contented with contentedness. In other words, they are not happy with how things are, because they know that things can be better. And then I would go so far as to say they know things can be better. And they've also learned, and this is a Seth Godin quote that I love, they've also learned that the best way to complain is to make things better. High performers recognize their agency in fixing things that aren't working. And those things could be big things. Those things could be small things. They could be the business you run, or they could be the house you live in, right? They could be your relationship with 100 employees, or they can be your relationship with your significant other. They recognize that instead of complaining, the best thing that they can do is engage in the effort of making things better. And on top of that, high performers don't need permission to act. They don't need somebody else to say, I am giving you the permission to try to make this thing better. High performers recognize that it is up to them, if they've identified a place that is not up to snuff, that they are not satisfied with, that the status quo is not working. Again, big things or small things, they recognize that they have agency to do something about it. And then, quite simply, they do something. They don't wait for somebody to say, I'm giving you permission to go fix that thing. They, in fact, just go try to fix the thing. So that is the first big lessons of what high performers are. And again, I hope you recognize that that doesn't mean you have to be a high-level athlete or a millionaire entrepreneur or a fill in the blank of what we may always consider or may only consider high performers. Okay, second lesson as to what I think high performers are is they have very high standards for themselves. This is something that I got from Tony Robbins, talking about the algorithm. As I started looking at this, I started getting more Tony Robbins content, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I got a lot out of the last couple of weeks of going down a Tony Robbins rabbit hole. But one of the things is this idea that we don't accomplish our goals as much as we accomplish what he calls our musts. Our musts. If something is a must, in other words, if our standards are so high that we must accomplish them, then we will find a way to accomplish them, as opposed to our goals, or what he says are our shoulds, right? Mark England says this, Tony Robbins said it too somewhere else, but we spend too much time shoulding all over ourselves. We should do this. We should do that. We should be a high performer. We should accomplish X, Y, and Z. We should do fill in the blank. And high performers have found a way to translate their shoulds into musts. And when something becomes a must, you find a way. The reason that you find a way is because if something is truly a must and you go try to fix it, you go try to make it better, if you go try to make it so that the status quo is no longer the status quo, you try and it doesn't work and it is a must, well then you go back to the beginning and you try again, and you go back to the beginning and you try again, and you continue to do that because it is not a should. It is not a nice to have. It is not, hey, wouldn't it be great if? It's a must. And so if you can raise your standards on the things that matter, where you recognize them as a must, not as a nice have, then you will accomplish those musts. And Tony Robbins talks about this idea, when he talks about raising standards, he talks about how people think that if they put poor effort in, they get poor rewards. Right? You put a mediocre effort in, you get mediocre rewards, but that's not actually how it works. He says what actually happens is if you put poor effort in or mediocre effort, what happens is you get no rewards. You get no rewards. And so then you bump up. You say, okay, well, I want some rewards. So I put in some effort. I put in a good effort, right? Well, what do you get with good effort? You get poor rewards. And then he says, okay, so then you bump up. You say, okay, I'm going to put the effort in. I'm going to put the attention in. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to go up to what he calls excellent effort. For our sake, we're not going to use the word excellent in this case. We're going to say great. We're going to put in great effort. We're going to put great work in. What are we going to get? We're going to get good rewards. And he says, man, this is something that pisses people off. You think, I'm putting in all this effort. I'm putting in all this great work, and all I'm getting is good reward. And then he says, because there's a fourth level to this, and it's back to the high standards. He says, you've got to put in outstanding effort. You've got to do outstanding work, because the difference between the rewards we get when we put in great work and the rewards we get when we put outstanding work in is all the rewards we're ever looking for. And we only get that. We only get the outstanding rewards by putting in that little bit of extra effort, that little bit of extra attention, that little bit extra of ourselves. And when we do that, we get outsized rewards. So again, high performers have high standards for themselves. They recognize that in order to accomplish big things, those big things, the effort toward those big things must be a must, not a should. This episode is brought to you by Shopify. When I got into CrossFit way back in 2006, one of the first things that stopped me in my tracks was watching people open affiliates. These were coaches, people who believed deeply in something, betting everything on an idea before most of the world had even heard of CrossFit. I remember being in complete awe of that. The willingness to bet on yourself, to turn what you love into what you do. 20 years later, that admiration has not wavered one bit. The difference now is that the tools to actually do something like that have never been better. Shopify is what makes something like this possible. Beautiful storefronts, no coding required, a checkout that converts, so returning customers can buy in a single click, plus a built-in AI assistant called Sidekick that helps you build, troubleshoot, and keep on moving. All you need is the idea. Shopify handles the rest. So if you're ready to start, try it for free at shopify.com/excellence. Today, you heard that right. Free trial at shopify.com/excellence. That's shopify.com/excellence. We're brought to you by Quo, Q-U-O, the business phone system built so you never miss a call. You know that moment when you text the whole team? Did anybody follow up with that guy who asked the thing and you get silence and tumbleweeds and one thumbs up emoji a couple hours later? Meanwhile, the customer has already found somebody else to help him. At some point, you've got to get a better system. Quo puts all your calls, texts, and voicemails in a single place so anyone on your team can pick up a conversation, see the full history, and respond super duper fast. It's the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by over 90,000 businesses. Set up in minutes on any device, keep your existing number, and there's even a built-in AI agent that handles after-hours calls so you never miss a lead. Money is on the line. Always say hello with Quo. Try Quo for free. Plus, get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/excellence. That's QUO.com/excellence. We are brought to you today by Momentous, the supplement company built around one standard, making the best products available. I don't take a lot of supplements. I'm fairly skeptical, quite honestly, but creatine is one that I keep coming back to because the research is overwhelming. It's one of the most studied, most proven supplements in existence, and it works. What I didn't always think as much about was the quality of what I was actually getting, though. That's where Momentous signature spec creatine stands apart. It's manufactured in a pharmaceutical facility using reverse osmosis water purification and verified through a 6-stage testing process with 4 independent agencies. That means 10x fewer impurities, tighter heavy metal limits, and screening for PFAS and microplastics. If you're going to take creatine every day, and you probably should, make sure it is the best. Head to livemomentous.com, use the code EXCELLENCE for up to 35% off your entire first order. That's livemomentous.com with the promo code EXCELLENCE. All right, the third lesson of high performers. High performers are disciplined enough to know that they can't fix everything. So they are targeted and intentional with their time, their energy, their attention, and their money or their resources. I like to think about that as their team, TEAM, time, energy, attention, and money. These are the resources that we have to expend, to invest, to use to build something more than we currently have. We have where we spend our time, how we spend our energy, what gets our attention, and what gets our resources. And so high performers recognize that they can't fix all the things that they see as wrong. So they get really targeted in understanding what is it within my circle of influence, what is it in my circle of control, that if I pushed on it, if I invested my team, I might be able to make this thing better. Cal Newport, who we've had on the show before, talks about this a lot. He wrote a book called Slow Productivity, which is similar to this, but he's really got this mantra that I think is so worth thinking about, which is do less, do better, and know why. And the reason why I think it's so valuable, especially in thinking about what it takes to be a high performer or why high performers are high performers, is that it's really easy, and I've fallen into this trap myself, to just think that the answer is doing more. That the answer is just doing more than you've ever done, more than anybody else. And there is, I think, an element of that. I do think that in order to have high standards, in order to truly make things better, it does require time and energy and attention and resources. So there's no question that there is an element of quantity here that plays a role. But what Cal Newport says, which is do less, do better, and know why you're doing the things you are doing, is that it forces us to recognize that more is not the answer. Better is the answer. So I'm going to figure out what is better, and then I'm going to do more of the better. And I'm going to do more of the better because I'm not going to waste my time and my energy and my attention and my money on things that don't matter, right? Essentialism, the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown, is all about this idea. The idea of figuring out what actually matters and recognizing all of the leaks that happen when we don't focus on just the few things that truly can move the needle. And if we don't recognize, if we don't identify, if we don't really narrow in on the things that actually do matter, we end up running out of time, running out of energy, running out of attention without having made any real impact on the thing we say we want to make better. And so high performers are disciplined enough to know that they only have so much, that they can only affect so much change. And so that they're not going to try to do it everywhere. They're going to say, I can do this thing, and then I'm going to try to do this thing as well as I possibly can. And I'm going to understand why I say yes to this and no to everything else. And that ultimately is the recipe for doing something that is truly remarkable, doing something that is truly unique and interesting and impactful, because you've invested the time that other people haven't been willing to invest. You've invested all of your attention, or as much of your attention as you can, in a thing that often only gets passing attention from most people. And ultimately, that's the thing that is required to, quote, perform at a high level, is the ability to go deep on something that matters. Of course, that means you understand, you've identified what does matter and how to actually make that thing go forward. So high performers are disciplined enough to know what those things are, and disciplined enough not to try to do everything, but actually only do the things that truly matter. Okay, so that's the third lesson I'm pulling out of this high performance challenge. The fourth one is that they do it for other people. High performers do it for other people. And I just saw this great video. I shared it with my boys. And Ben has told the story before, but I had never actually seen the footage. But about Kobe Bryant, the basketball player, I think it was his rookie year, the playoffs of his rookie year, the last game of the season, because, spoiler alert, they lost. The Lakers were playing the Utah Jazz, and it was up against the end of the game, and the game was really close, and nobody else wanted to take the final shot, but Kobe did. And over the course of 2 minutes of gameplay, Kobe shot 4 air balls, and the team lost, and their season was over because it was the playoffs. And in the video, they had an interview that somebody had done with Kobe sometime after, and he was talking about the day after that game. He got home at like 3 a.m. and he went to the local high school, and he had the janitor let him in. I have no idea how the janitor was involved, but the janitor let him in, and he shot baskets all day. He shot baskets from 3 a.m. to who knows when, to at the end of the next day. And the reason I bring this up, and the reason I think about it with this last lesson of high performers do it for other people, is because he said he never wanted to have that feeling again of letting his teammates down. And of course, one day of practice doesn't fix anything, but it as a symbol, as a representation of what a high performer does, I think it's a really good one. And then back to a Tony Robbins thing. He's got this idea of the 6 human needs. I don't know if this is his thing or if he just categorized it nicely and gave it a frame, but he's got these 6 human needs. And he says that they're certainty, uncertainty, significance, connection, growth, and contribution. And it's that last one that I think about with this final lesson of high performers do it not for themselves, but for other people. They do it because contribution is a motivating factor. It is something that pushes us forward, or it pulls us forward. And actually, I think about Jim Murphy, who again we had on the show. He wrote Inner Excellence, which is a great book, which I should have reviewed while I went through this high performance challenge, because it is all about this, and especially all about this lesson. Here's a great quote from Inner Excellence by Jim Murphy. He wrote this: "We don't pursue peak performance for the trophy or adoration, but to discover something within us and experience something we've never experienced before. We compete for the competition itself, to fully experience the moment and feel fully alive. We do this to help others, including our opponents, to do the same thing so we can all learn and grow and raise the level of excellence in our lives. We crave adversity and challenges as a means of seeing the truth about who we are in that moment and therefore who we can become." So there's a lot in there, and go back through that list of human needs: significance, connection, growth, contribution. There's a lot of that in that little bit that I just read from Jim Murphy. And so the last thing that I think that makes me think of, and I shared this with the crew, the Chase Club, in the Friday Chase Club Chat Club, I found a clip from Danny Myers talking to Tim Ferriss. Danny Myers is the author of Unreasonable Hospitality, and he's also a restaurateur. He's one of the best, most successful restaurateurs. And my point, though, is he was talking about what he's seen as differentiators between high performers and everybody else. And he identified that most high performers are motivated by one of three things. A love of winning is one thing. A fear of losing is another, or it's simply the pursuit of mastery. And when I think about this last lesson, this idea that high performers do it for other people, I don't know that being obsessed with winning will get you that far. Ultimately, because a lot of that is outside of your control. And I don't think that if you are motivated by fear, you are ever going to grow to the degree that you can grow, because fear is an exercise of ego. And in Jim Murphy's wording, ego and fear is selfish, and mastery is selfless. And inner excellence is the pursuit of selfless mastery. And so hopefully through all of that, through those four big lessons, you recognize that being a high performer, again, I'm assuming that there's some identity shift that needs to happen. And that did happen for me as I went through this identity shift of what it actually means to be a high performer. It doesn't mean championships. It doesn't mean podiums. It doesn't mean a certain salary. It doesn't mean notoriety. It doesn't mean fame. It doesn't mean a certain number of followers. It doesn't mean anything except the recognition that things could be better. The recognition that making things better is far, far more useful than complaining. And that the way we make things better is to hold ourselves to the highest of standards. To recognize that if we should do something, we might, but if we must do it, we will. We have to recognize that being a high performer means being incredibly intentional about what gets our time, our energy, our attention, and our money, our team, because all of those things are not endless. We don't have endless amounts of any of those things. And so we have to be careful how we invest them. And then finally, a high performer doesn't do it for themselves. They don't do it because they want to win. They don't do it because they hate the idea of losing. But they do it because they recognize that being a high performer, that performing at a level that is outstanding, that is remarkable, is one of the best ways that we can contribute to people in our lives, to the world around us. It's one of the best ways that we ourselves can grow. And it is one of the best ways that we can reach for our own potential. All right, quick note on challenges. Like I said, I'm really bullish on these. I'm going to spend the next month really diving into how we can make challenges a more central part of what we do here at Chasing Excellence, because I think that they bridge the high-level conversations and ideas that we have here on the show with the daily action of fighting against drift and chasing excellence. And so bear with me. I'm going to pause on the challenges. I was going to do another one in a couple weeks. I'm going to pause on that so that I can give myself a little bit more time to figure out how to do them better. I hope you will join me and us when I come back and launch the next one. The next one is going to be a 21-day happiness challenge. I'm excited about this. And again, I hope you consider joining me. In the meantime, go back to the Trigger Challenge, go back to the High Performer Challenge, the kickoff episodes, the High Performer one that we're just wrapping up now. Go back in the Chasing Excellence feed to June 11th, and you can get more context as to the specifics of it. And again, I'd love to hear from you, Patrick at chasingexcellence.email. Until then.